The power of feedback for infants and toddlers, making the most of interactions. Hi, this is Nicole McCaskill, Community Learning Coordinator for Equipped. Thank you for participating in the upcoming recorded content. At the end of the session, you will click a link to complete an evaluation. The evaluation allows you to receive a DCD-EE training certificate. You will be asked to agree to an online learning honor code during the evaluation process. The recorded webinar content and completing the online evaluation should take about an hour and a half to complete, and the total DCD-EE training credit you will receive is an hour and a half. Your training certificate will be available to you once you complete the evaluation. And after you submit your evaluation, that certificate will also be in a follow-up email to you that also includes some resources. Our presenters for this session include Rodas Riggins Jr., Quality Enhancement Coordinator, and Ashley Allen, Work Environment and Compensation Coordinator. This content was originally presented and recorded on March 1st, 2022 during a facilitated live webinar.
My name is Ashley Allen, and I'm the Work Environment and Compensation Coordinator with Equipped, and I am here tonight with my colleague, whom I'll let introduce himself.
Thank you, Ashley Mae. Hey, y'all. I'm Rodas Riggins Jr., and I'm one of the Quality Enhancement Coordinators at Equipped. Welcome to the power of feedback for infants and toddlers, making the most of interactions. Let's take a look at some of the conversations we're hoping to invite you to engage in this evening. We're hoping to take a few minutes to explore some of the common myths and facts about feedback. We're going to define feedback as well as discuss its purpose. We're going to reflect on some of the adults' roles and considerations related to feedback. And we'll take a look at where opportunities for providing feedback or utilizing feedback may exist throughout some of our naturally occurring routines and activities, as well as interactions. We're going to take a moment to explore some strategies for embedding feedback into our daily practices. And your PowerPoint presentation will include a plethora of additional resources for extending feedback further and utilizing feedback to support children's learning, their development, as well as to extend their engagement. And we also take a moment to reflect upon what feedback might look like for children who may be less verbal as well. So let's open our space and conversations by taking a moment to reflect upon a time when perhaps we received feedback about something in our personal lives or even our professional lives. So think about a time when you received feedback in your personal or professional life, and then consider these three prompts. Feel free to unmute. Feel free to lift your response in the chat as well. A time when someone provided feedback to you. And we'll give you time to feel free to lift those responses in the chat, or as I said, feel free to unmute as well. Anyone ever shared anything with you that might have been in the form of feedback, and how was it? And was that feedback most of all helpful to you, hurtful, or did it perhaps just did not cause any reactions at any level in you? And this could be with a spouse, a mate, a boo. It doesn't have to be in the professional space. I see some heads nodding.
Would add to sometimes jumping into the conversation and just thinking about feedback. It's not something I personally connect to my everyday life, and it's hard to think about where does that fit. And the little video clip that I included in the registration video or the registration email was about feedback. And one of the examples in there was maybe being in school and how a teacher gives you feedback on your work as a student. And I think another example beyond that could be, since we're in early childhood, even feedback on your role or your performance, or like our staff evaluations would be an example, but both of those would be an educational setting in some sense, but I don't know if that helps get the wheels turning thinking about that too. Give some context.
Thank you, Ashley Mae. Thank you, love.
So I guess I just got some feedback back. I volunteer as a GAL, and I was supposed to be in court tomorrow for the case, but I won't be. But I still had to do a court report, and I got some good feedback from both the attorney and my supervisor, you know, laying out what I had done really well, and then like some things that I had missed that could in the future help me sell my point better. So that was nice. And it was, I guess, written because it was via email. She did follow up with a phone call too. When she did follow up with a phone call, she did just try and make it all positive. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for.
That's it, Miss Amanda. That's it. Just a time and a space when someone provided any type of feedback to you. So thank you so much for lifting your experience into the space. Uh-oh, Miss Genevieve has lifted something. Should be more mindful of my eyes and body language, because it sometimes says how I feel without me speaking. Oh my God, you are illustrating the power of nonverbal feedback. That is so true. That I was okay with that feedback. Wow. Doing my evaluation. And Ms. Kimberly, if we may ask, was the feedback supportive to you?
I was trying to finish typing it and send it before I was done.
Oh.
I was going to say I received feedback from my director doing an evaluation about my positive influence in the classroom. And it did help me as far as being aware of how your attitude affects the dynamics of the classroom with your teacher that you're working with, as well as your students in the classroom.
Beautiful, Miss Kimberly. Beautiful, beautiful. I remember one time doing one of my evaluation. One of my managers, she said that most of the evaluation she had done all day, she was waiting to talk to me because she just saw that my love and my passion for the work just showed through in everything that I did. And so that type of feedback just really supported me to be more intentional in this work, to really be more present in this work and connected to the people in this work.
I think before moving on, I've never thought about it in this way before, but feedback that can come across in a negative way can have positive impacts too in some circumstances. And I'm thinking about a time that I was hurt when it was said to me, but that I was too passionate.
Yes.
And it actually fired me up to be more passionate about what I was doing. So I think it was meant to have other intentions. And I think it's important to think about how feedback can operate in that way too.
Wow. Thank you, Ashley Mae. Thank you. Miss Dina, from the director, she told me my tone was basic. What does she mean by basic? But your work ethic was great.
She just said sometimes She wished that I would be a little more assertive with my tone. And I guess from working with childcare over the years,
Mhm.
some parents interpret your tone as, oh, they were trying to be nasty. So I just try to keep it monotone. But she said it was just too monotone, so she wanted me to add a little bit of assertiveness with it.
Wow. And was that helpful to you? And did you add a
Um,
little bit of assertiveness to your tone?
yes, I did. I mean, I had over the years, in other words, I had to myself, I thought I was toning it down because, I didn't want to come off as rude or being disrespectful because sometimes I would just answer with, if someone asks me something, it's just a yes or no, or that's pretty much it. So I'm learning to better elaborate or have a more assertive tone when I'm speaking.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Look, we call that finding your voice.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay.
We call that finding your voice, Miss Dina. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes, sir.
And thank you. Thank you so much. And there are other responses that have been lifted in the chat. Ashley Mae, would you like to lift any of those into the space?
Yeah, I've been keeping my eye on those too, that we have everything from being able to get feedback from a speaking coach to someone, Jessica saying that she's the opposite, but always too loud, but still loving. That feedback has been received from their director to let them know they're a good role model in the classroom, but sometimes I can let go of being so schedule oriented and let the children flow while playing, and that it helps her. And that was from Jocelyn. So the feedback was positive in the sense that it was put into practice or made you think more intentionally about your practice.
Mhm. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So you see that in all of our personal and professional lives, we all find ourselves in these moments where we are receiving various forms of feedback daily, varying forms of feedback daily. So as we open the space and conversations for thinking about the type of feedback and the quality of feedback that we provide to young children. And I must pause and say that although our conversations may be anchored this evening in infants and toddlers, all of our conversations and the strategies are supportive and applied to all children. Some of them we reply to the adults that we're working with. Um, so let's thank you for lifting your personal experiences. Let's continue opening the conversation by exploring a few of the myths or facts related to feedback. So Ashley May, are we doing this via poll or are we just going to do this via lifting the statements into the space? Oh, she got the poll set up, y'all. So I'll read the first question and then I invite some of you to read some of these statements as well. So our first poll states, feedback supports engagement, learning, and children efforts. Is that a myth or a fact? In other words, is that true or false? Law, y'all hit that fact button so quick. So does feedback support engagement, learning, and children's efforts?
There's my like-minded person out there somewhere. Rodas and I had this conversation earlier.
We did, Ashley May. I love it. I love it. So we have 23 of 28 responses. I know some of you are in spaces where you may not be able to respond.
So I'm going to stop just so we can see, because I don't know that they can see the results until I share them back out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we have 96% who said that that statement is indeed a fact, and we have 4% who said that that statement is indeed a myth. So actually, I would just like to pause for a second and open the space for individuals to perhaps share why they feel that statement is a fact, or why they may feel that statement is indeed a myth. And feel free to unmute, feel free to lift your responses in the chat as well.
I feel like it's a fact because I notice when I give my children feedback as far as what I see them doing with positive reinforcement, like I see that this person is listening or following directions, it tends to help the others to fall in line when they see that you are giving one feedback for what they're doing right. The others will follow suit and they will come to what they're supposed to be doing.
Beautiful, Ms. Kimberly. Thank you. So you see that feedback for one actually may benefit feedback for others. So thank you. Thank you. So would anyone like to share why they perhaps feel that that statement may be indeed a myth? Because Ashley and I, as she stated, we just had this type of conversation this afternoon during our last planning meeting.
And I know that it was one person, but I said myth too. I just didn't vote. So I don't want anyone to feel like there's a lone ranger out there with that one.
Yes, yes. And would you mind telling them why you felt that that statement could go either way, Ashley Mae?
Well, feedback itself certainly can support engagement, learning, and effort, but I think it depends on what the feedback is.
Mm-hmm.
Feedback doesn't always come across in a positive way or in a way that exemplifies all the things that you were sharing yourselves about feedback when it gave a positive reaction in your practice. Feedback can sometimes have other consequences too. So I think it depends on how that feedback is delivered, what kind of feedback, the language, the tone. So lots of pieces to consider, but that's just my opinion.
Yes, yes. And that's exactly what she told me this afternoon. So we sort of rested that, yeah, it might and it may not, depending on the effectiveness as well as the quality of the feedback. Let's do one more. Let's lift another myth or fact into the space.
So I wanted to say I did put fact, but now that Ashley said that, I wanted just to add on that. So
Yes, Ms.
when
Malika, yes.
my kids, my own kids, I know for a fact that that is correct, what Ashley is doing, and what Ashley just said, because it always depends on how I give my feedback. Now, every child is different, and even in my classroom, but it does depend on how the feedback is given, and what person or what child it is that is receiving that feedback. But I'm still kind of in the fact. So.
I love that you can see that these statements are not always linear, or not always, the outcomes are not always black and white, that there's great variability in how feedback is being delivered, as well as how feedback is perhaps being received, received by the individual. So let's lift one more myth or fact into the space. This next one is going to invite you to consider this statement. Feedback only involves back and forth verbal exchanges with children. Feedback only involves back and forth verbal exchanges with children. Is that a myth or a fact?
And that's everybody. Let's see.
Beautiful. So we have 95% of individuals indicating that that statement is indeed a myth. We have 5% indicating that that statement may indeed be a fact. So we'll do the exact same thing we just did with our first poll. We'll open the space for individuals who may feel comfortable to share why they indeed feel that it may be a myth. Let's start with the myth first, and then we'll open the space for individuals to share why they may feel that that statement is indeed a fact.
Well, I know for me personally, I have received feedback and not said anything.
Mm.
There's been, there's a time and a setting sometimes where you feel you can rebuttal or accept it or whatever, and sometimes you can't. You're sitting there. So that's why I chose the one I did.
That is so. Miss Amanda, so you indicated that is a myth. That's a myth. Thank you, love. Thank you. Would anyone mind sharing why they feel that that statement may indeed be a fact? Miss Jocelyn, I said myth because I could say some things depending on the feedback. Would you mind telling me a little bit more about that your statement, my love?
I'm very nonverbal, especially when it comes to my eyes. So if something doesn't agree with me, I'm quick to like put my eyebrows up or probably give somebody a look like, did you hear that?
Oh,
Like,
I got you now. So you are actually using nonverbal forms of feedback, which is
yes,
a total
sir.
contradiction to that statement that it can only occur in these verbal exchanges. Beautifully said, beautifully illustrated, Ms. Jocelyn. Thank you. So that statement is indeed a myth because we know that feedback it may include verbal exchanges to some extent, but it can include nonverbal cues as well. It can include messages from the environment, from the space as well. Just want to highlight with the other two. So thank you for engaging in that myth and fact activity. The other two statements that were included, but in the interest of time, we're going to sort of just, I'll lift them quickly into the space. And the third one was just that feedback and praise are the same. So hold on to that statement, that feedback and praise are the same. And the other one was thinking about the role of the adults, that adults and the quality of the environment set the tone for feedback. So just hold on to those statements and it may become, we will have an opportunity to actually come back and circle back to these last two remaining myths or facts. But let's take a moment and actually define what exactly is feedback with Miss Ashley, or my Ashley May, as I call her.
Thank you, Ravi. So I think you've already started unpacking what this looks like. And it can be, I like to think of feedback as a continuum, right? Because if it's a myth that feedback is always going to be engaging and supportive, then we know that at one end of the continuum, it can be judgmental. It can be, did I tell you to touch that? It can be, no, that's not right. And that's feedback. But it can range on that continuum into a space of focused, task-related, and around the achievements or improvements on what a child is doing in the moment to apply that directly to your practice. And it really is meant to fill in the gaps between what a child is doing right now in the moment and what is aimed to be understood. And you can think of that as if it's your goals for that child in the classroom. As you are engaging with a child and you're seeing where they are, this is what you are already doing in your practice every day. It's really thinking around intentional feedback that's going to help build them to get to that space from where they are in the moment to where you want them to go next. And as Rhodas had mentioned earlier, we have tons of resource links embedded throughout the PowerPoint that you'll all receive later. But for those of you who want to go deeper into this concept of what feedback really is, this link is going to take you to some modules through FPG that get deeper into that concept. And Rhodas, if you want to add anything to anything I'm adding or talking about, you jump in at any time. But this is, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and all of us learned this in child development 101, that the space between what a child knows or can do and this second level we want them to get to, we know that's based on Vygotsky. That's the zone of proximal development. We always see that there in terms of what a child currently is capable of doing and how we want to nurture the child to stretch to those higher levels.
Which leads us right into seeing scaffolding embedded in these descriptions of what feedback does and what it looks like. So it's providing suggestions, it's giving hints. It's not solving the problem for a child, but let's say you're working with a child on the floor and they're trying to fit puzzle blocks into a container. Pushing the right one towards the shape that they're playing with, but without doing the whole thing for them, is going to be an example of how you would give a hint or a cue that might not even be a verbal hint in the moment to help get them along that continuum of what they're working on. When it is verbal, it's clear. And it's also going to explain why it's important. And another piece of this is that it's individualized. It's going to be conversational or in a one-on-one interaction with the infants, toddlers, and as Rhodas mentioned, to any age child or person that you're working with, is that it's individualized to what they are doing in that specific moment. So we talked about this a little bit, and I like getting deep about how our brains work. So what is it about meaningful or effective feedback that makes it effective? Why is it that saying things in a certain way or doing these things is important? Well, the whole reason behind it is that what you are doing, and you say this phrase all the time, and I hear folks in higher ed saying, well, I never really got all the tools to think critically or critical thinking skills until I was, later on in high school or beginning college. What you're doing every day is teaching children the thinking process for critical thinking. Effective feedback, and this is a big word, promotes metacognition. And you can break that down. I like giving scaffolding and hints too. Meta, that's big, right? Cognition, cognitive development, brain work. So it's promoting big brain work or thinking about how you think. How often do we really sit and unpack how we think? We go through most of our day on autopilot. By the time you're an adult, do you really think about the steps it takes this morning to get out a toothbrush, put toothpaste on the toothbrush? Did I get all of my teeth? We don't think about our actions in daily life. And what we're doing in this is verbalizing children's thinking and using certain strategies to get them thinking in a certain way. So what I want to do for a second, and we won't take long to do this, but I think it's interesting because I love activities that make you get in it. And anybody can unmute and just tell me, don't overthink this. This is not an overthinking question. I want somebody to just tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Sitting in my truck waiting for my kids to come out of basketball practice.
Okay.
Sitting in my room, want a little bit more dinner, but don't want to eat while I'm on here.
Well, know that we are adults and appreciate our human needs and that it is okay. We do not give judgmental feedback. Really, what are you doing? So you're sitting in a truck waiting, trying to multitask and eat and keep your needs met while you're participating.
Eating my peanut butter.
pretty literal, right? So we're going to regroup, and I have another question for you and anybody that wants to share. Based on our conversations just up in this session to this point, what connections are you making to your experiences as an educator?
I mean, I guess I'm going to be giving a lot of feedback as well as receiving a lot of feedback, just depending on the situation, because I could be giving it to the kids and then receiving it from my director type of thing. So to me, it's all forms of it.
Or if you're co-teachers or your kids' parents, I mean, that's what I'm thinking about. There's so many ways that you're going to be giving it and receiving it. And could be multiple ways and throughout the whole day too.
I think being mindful of your feedback or others' feedback as well.
I think that if you get feedback, even if it's negative or positive feedback, you can either way you can take something positive away from it.
I appreciate that. And now I'm going to ask you a metacognitive question. I want you to tell me about what just happened in your brain when you were trying to answer both questions. What was the difference in your thinking process, even in your head, if you didn't share it out loud, between tell me about what you're doing, and then tell me about any connections you're making between our content and your experiences teaching? What was different that you were thinking about or had to do?
The first one I didn't have to really think about because I already knew what I was doing. And the second one, I kind of had thought about, but I had to like kind of make sure I remember what we was talking about.
I think I took the like not as personal. You know, when I started thinking about it, you know, at first I was thinking of when I'm getting personal feedback, what it means to me personally. And then when you shifted it to how are you doing this every day with your job or kids, then I was able to remove myself from the situation and start thinking about all the ways that I give it to the kids, their parents, and receive it from such and such.
And I placed in the chat in the spirit of full disclosure and transparency that when Ashley and I were talking through this activity, I could not make that switch between question 1 and question 2. I was like, ah! I couldn't go there that quickly.
Why do you think I might have asked us to do that as a cognitive exercise? What was the purpose?
I would say to show your point that we go throughout the day not thinking, but then something cognitive comes up and we have to take a moment and think.
And how very much so. That's one definite reason behind this. I also wanted to make the point of how often do we ask children, tell me a little bit about what you're doing. We ask that a lot, right? Tell me about it. It's that open-ended phrase that is like where we go to begin the conversation. Is there anything wrong with that phrase? Not at all. Because you still have to open the door. You still have to get the conversation going. But my point there is also thinking about the intentionality of how you want that child's brain to engage. Asking a question can elicit a response, or you can ask a question that gets metacognition, or the big brain work, working in a different way. So it's very different to say an answer. What are you doing? Versus what connections do you see between concept A and concept B? That requires two completely different trains in your brain working to answer and to think and reflect and connect. So it's really about the intentionality and the power, just like we said in our title, of intentional feedback, because there's nothing wrong with getting you to tell me about what you're doing. I've got to get us going there for you to think about what you're doing. But the way we ask and what we ask, what comes out of our mouth is going to trigger a different response. And I believe, Rhodas, that's going to lead us to you talking a little bit about how this is actually going to support children in real life.
Honey, I just love talking. Well, listen to you talking, honey. So I'm just kidding. I love listening to you talking and break that metacognition stuff down. I can't even say it for South Carolina, y'all. But I just love that.
Work. Just make it easy. Big brain work.
And the intentionality behind what we're doing. I love how you phrase that. So just want to take a minute to just quickly lift and there are responses on the slide. But I'm like Ashley. I'm like, I mean, we can lift this content in this written format, but y'all are living and doing this work every single day. So how does feedback support children? How does the feedback that you provide to young children every day support them? There are a few responses listed on the slide, but I mean, are these benefits aligned with what you see every single day?
I think so. Like if I give a child a feedback, like telling them to hold their plate with two hands, so that way they can take it to the trash and throw it away. You know, eventually they just naturally will grab their plate with two hands. And I feel like that benefited them from my feedback or instruction, however you look at it.
Beautiful, Miss Amy. And so if we were to link that to one of these bullet points, you're supporting them in becoming more independent. So you're fostering independence.
You also heard
and completing tasks.
When you think about what does it look like, I heard her say, hold your plate with two hands. So she's giving specific feedback related to the task in the moment.
Specific directions and instructions. Specific, clear, and specific. Thank you, Miss Amy. Thank you. So feedback does to support us, young children, all of us in self-regulating. That could be anything from the ability to soothe, thinking about our infants, our young infants, the ability to soothe, to calm themselves, think about our toddlers as well, supporting this independence, completing our tasks, staying engaged, learning from their mistakes. I love that is an important part of feedback as well, because there's this space between what they know and what we may want them to know. So that's learning, opportunity to learn from their mistakes and to learn new skills and information. And the ultimate goal is that our young children will also begin to provide feedback to others. We see that occurring every single day in the spaces as well. So let's take a moment to lift a video of one of our great infant teacher who's told us through one of our last session that she has been in this infant classroom for over 18 years, Miss April. So as you watch this video, be thinking about what is occurring. What are the adults doing? What are the children doing? And also think about what type of feedback is being provided. So as Nicole is loading that video, be thinking about the types of feedback that are included. So you're looking for verbal feedback as well. So you're looking for things such as the adults talk, and is self-talk and parallel talk occurring?
Did y'all see that flash for just a second?
It flashed for a second. You're looking
Okay.
for the nonverbal, your hints, your cues, your assistance, and you're looking for how does this environment feel?
Y'all see it now?
We see it now.
All right, I'm gonna give it a whirl.
Look, ready, set, psh, there you go. Where's it going? Ah! It went away. Ooh. Where's the boat, Brooks? Where did your boat go? you squeeze it? Let's wait and drink some water later out of our drinking cup. Ooh. Did you like that? The water can come out? Oh, where's Rob? Rob, you want to play in the water? Rob, you want to play in the water? Or the flowers?
What's that, Robbie? Are you gonna stand up?
So today I've been doing that more. He pulled up this morning on Miss April.
Is that what you want to do, Rob? You want to
He's
stand
been doing big boy things today.
Okay, Rob, hold on tight.
What would you like, Nathan? There you go. You're gonna show Rob the flowers? Oh, you got Miss April's knee wet. I know, it felt good. Thank you, Brooks. The water felt nice.
You smell good, Rob. You want to
The
smell?
water felt nice.
Smell good. Roses.
Ooh.
They're pink.
Is the water on your hand?
You can smell them. They smell great. Ooh, Miss April has thyme in here.
Thank you, Miss Genevieve. I couldn't think of what that was smelling this morning.
Baby, we got a little mint in here.
Mint and thyme. Yeah, that's what I got this morning.
Smells good.
Did you find the green boat?
I muted myself because of my little chirping. Oh God, I'm gonna try to do this as much as I can, y'all. I don't want y'all to have to put up with my little noise, fire smoke detector up there. So thinking about that very brief interaction of the adults and of the children, what type of verbal feedback was occurring?
Well, I can tell you for sure because that was me in the video.
Oh, just tell us, honey, what was occurring? Yeah. I love that. I love that when you say, what are you going to look at it when I can tell you about it? So tell us about it.
So I actually remember that day we were kind of getting more into learning about verbal communication and actually speaking to the children as if you were an adult, being very descriptive of what you're talking about, and just kind of really zoning in on what you're saying, your actual words that you're saying.
Beautiful. And we saw this great attention to expanding children's learning and those opportunities. We saw this tremendous amount of continued engagement and ongoing participation. And we saw this beautiful adult language, both self and parallel talk, that actually is an essential component of feedback. What about the space? How did the environment feel? How did the environment feel to you?
It felt very welcoming, for sure.
Yes, Miss Brittany. Look, very calm, inviting. So you have to think about the adults' ways of being in the spaces as well. Calm voice was used. So many different types of feedback. All forms were occurring at the verbal level, the nonverbal level. You saw scaffolding occurring as well. You saw hints and assistance occurring, and you saw how the environment was a great facilitator for feedback and language and interactions and relationships to occur.
It was positive too, Rhodas. It was positive.
Very
Even
positive vibe.
when the child was getting ready to drink the water out of the water table, not the best idea. There was no or stop, but we'll drink water later. Let's pour, whatever the redirect was. So that was nice.
Yeah, we drink water later from your cup. Beautiful redirection. Yes.
I heard that one of the authors of the Itters Are, Debbie Cryer, said one time, when you're in an infant room, you know that the language is good if you can be in the environment and close your eyes and just listen, and you know exactly what's going on, because the teacher is describing the actions of what other children are doing, describing feelings of the children, describing what the teacher is doing. So you don't even visually really need to see what's going on, because you can just with your ears listen and know exactly what's happening the whole time.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So I did have one question. Was that kid wearing a camera on his hat?
Yes.
Was the kid doing it for the video, or did his parents make him wear that video? No.
For the video. So that's called a kid cam. So there's some video clips where you can see the perspective of the child as well, which is pretty cool. That clip is, you just saw one camera, but there's some edited versions where there's two. I was there that day, Genevieve. I don't know if you remember that.
I love that y'all were live and in living color. I love that.
I also noticed that it was very intentional as far as not having a lot of children around that table at once. So they were able to connect with the children because it was just 2 or 3 children at the time.
Beautiful, Miss Kimberly. Beautiful. So another important environmental consideration and engagement consideration. Beautiful, beautiful. So we must, I don't know, Ash and I, when we were going through this afternoon, I was like, oh my God, there's nothing that we do anymore that we cannot lift the voices and experiences of children with special needs, or children who may be less verbal. Oftentimes you may see this in the literature as children who are quote unquote nonverbal, but all those terms sort of feel more deficit-based to us. So just want to briefly take a moment to think about, so what might feedback mean for children who may be less verbal? We know that our infants and our toddlers are in their language developmental phases, so they may indeed themselves be less verbal. So we have to think about why. Why might some children be less verbal in various spaces? And we lifted 4 different ways of being that may impact a child's verbal expression, but there are other things that also may impact children who may be less verbal. I think about the impact of traumatic experiences on young children as well, and how that impacts their developmental stages as well, including language and communication. But we know for some children there may be speech language delays that may be occurring, that children may be reluctant to be more verbal, and when they may be new in various spaces, and when they perhaps may speak a different language than what is spoken in the environment. And that some children, based on their just aspects of their biological being, their personality, that they may be more anxious or even be shy. So really just wanted to ensure that we are laying these considerations as well as we're talking about providing feedback. The authors of one of the brief that's on your PowerPoint, this is actually the title of it, providing feedback with nonverbal preschoolers, but we also recognize that these considerations also apply to our infants and toddlers, because they are indeed in this less verbal phase in terms of expressive communication, but we know that their receptive communication may be extremely strong. So the key is to recognize that regardless of the child's communication stage or status, we can still provide all of these critical elements of feedback by focusing primarily on what the child is doing and how we are responding to the young child. And these are some questions for considerations as well that we would like you to ponder as we continue our conversation related to, providing effective feedback to young children. So think about your language, think about the messages that you want to convey, think about how you're providing information, and always think about how you are, valuing and encouraging and affirming young children, regardless of their developmental states.
Really is Yeah, I was going to say it's really recapping a lot of what we've talked about, and I would love for us to dig in more on looking at some examples. We've talked a lot about what it looks like, how we might think about that for children who may not be as verbal or even infants, because it means, as Nicole said, we need to have such a language-rich environment that I tell infant teachers that we feel crazy. Like, you'll catch yourself later in the supermarket by yourself. Look at the oranges. Can you see what the texture is like? Feel the oranges. And somebody looks at me and thinks I'm a nut. But it's because you get so used to describing and talking and giving them the language. Because remember, first, you've got to give the language so that when they get to the toddler phase, we can start getting them to tell me what you're doing. After they're telling you what they're doing, we are getting them to do the big brain work. They aren't going to be able to tell us what connections they're making if we haven't started back in infancy with providing all the language for them to be able to do that later. We've talked a little bit about what it feels like and how these messages can show up in the environment. And we had a few more little clips that we wanted to share. Rhoda?
And Ash, yeah,
Sorry,
I was just going to share, since we've had an opportunity to view an infant video clip, let's lift our amazing toddler into
I
the
was
space.
going to say the same exact thing.
Yes,
We so much
ma'am. Yes, and this aligns to our earlier conversation about children who may be less verbal. You're actually going to see a video clip of a young child with special medical conditions, might be the more appropriate way to phrase it. He actually uses a feeding tube. So as you're watching this video clip, Ashley and I sent out a video reflection sheets ahead of time, but it's okay if you don't have access to the sheet. We're going to follow the same prompt. What type of feedback is occurring? What are the adults doing? What are the children doing? What words would you use to describe the environment? We're using those same 4 prompts. What type of feedback is occurring? What are the adults doing? What are the children doing? What words would you use to describe the environment or the spaces?
In here. It's all gone. Yeah, there's nothing inside. There's nothing inside. See? There's nothing in there. You can look right through it. Here's some coffee. You smell it? Okay. It's strong. Has a strong smell to it. Where are you going? You don't want the crackers on the table anymore? Here's some more tops. You gonna make music with it? The boom boom. Is this the top for the coffee? Yep, it goes on there. This one's too big. It's the same top, but it's for a bigger one. You want this one? Try this lid. Uh-oh. Here, I'll hold it still for you. You switch hands. You put this one in this hand. Put that one on top. That one fits. Thank you, Alu. You gonna put that one on top? Is it staying on? Uh-oh, fell off. Oh, Lou, what are you eating? Where's our other food? What's yours? Say, this is mine too. Here, there's more food in here, Isaiah. What's yours? What's yours, Lou? You have your mashed potatoes? What, Lou? Are you all done? Are you all done? We're gonna flush it, and then we'll be all done. Putting water in there. It's going in your tummy. You push it in. It's almost done. Yep, I push it, you push it the rest. There you go. It's all done now. You push the rest in. Alrighty, buddy. All done. You go get your coat out of your cubby? Are you ready to go out?
Open the door.
Let me remember too, and excuse that there seemed to be a small delay in terms of processing and playing. I hope that was that only on my end.
Did that play okay for everybody? Okay.
I don't know what's wrong with that video this evening. So when Ashley May shared this video, I was like, oh my God, we have got to use this video. Because it just really anchors us in this conversation to really remind us to always be considering the experiences, the opportunities for engagement of our young children with special needs in our environments, in our spaces as well. So what was occurring in this video? What type of feedback was occurring? Let's just process using our same 4 prompts again. What type of feedback was occurring? And feel free to unmute. Feel free to lift your responses in the chat.
I think she was making him feel secure. That was one thing I noticed. She made that little boy feel a part of and secure in his environment, feeling safe.
Beautiful, Miss Kimberly. So you saw these keen aspects of honoring and valuing.
I also saw like she had him smell the coffee. So even though, the kids couldn't have coffee, but they might eventually taste it, he couldn't, but he could still smell it. So he wasn't excluded from that experience of using his, one of his senses.
His senses, yes, Miss Amanda, yes. What else was occurring? Let's move away from these prompts a bit. What else was occurring? Just stay right there in that space. Both of you, look, Miss Kimberly, you recognize how the environment was conducive and facilitative of this interaction. Ms. Amanda, you talk about using other senses, these sensory experiences that we provide to young children. What else was occurring in that environment?
I think that she was letting him experience by himself, kind of guiding him and helping him throughout the process, but letting him do his own little thing, kind of figuring out what he was doing on his own, with a little bit of guidance, but he was doing it on his own.
Beautiful, Ms. Olika. We saw moments of great prompts and scaffolding and hints and assistance. We saw all those elements of effective feedback in this video clip.
That's what I was going to say, Rhodas. I just love the patience that the teacher had with the child. And I think that is the most important thing when you're dealing with someone with special needs, that you have to have that patience. And she took time to explain to him what was going on. And I just love the communication and engagement between the two.
Miss Shanita, I'm going to send you my EBT card.
Yeah, and you
Because
can.
I am, as high as ration is, I'm going to send you my EBT. Oh, beautiful points. And that is such a critical considerations when engaging with young children of varying ability levels. This allowance of space, time, this careful attention to pacing. We saw that in the video. She allowed space and time for him to respond, and he was responding. But allowing children time to respond in whatever format or mode they can is a beautiful consideration in terms of providing feedback and an important part of just our everyday reflective practices. So thank you, Ms. Shanita. Thank you. Thank you. Other comments or reactions to the video? Ashley May, anyone else would like to add anything?
She gave him some like responsibility about like going and getting his jacket after they were done, and she gave really good like one step simple directions, so not to overwhelm him. Like she waited until they were completely done and said, can you want to go get your jacket so you know we can go outside? And just the, like you said, like the pacing of how she actually interacted with him was great.
Beautiful, Miss Brittany. Thank you, love. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I jumped up when Ashley showed me that video this afternoon. I was like, yes, we are definitely lifting him into the space. So you saw all those elements of feedback referenced there in that video clip.
I was just going to acknowledge quickly too that moment of sitting with the feeding tube conversation piece turned into a very shared, like, intimate routine that was not made to be, it wasn't othered. And so often with young children who have a need that may not fit with the schedule or the pacing or the way that the rest of a classroom might work, it was a moment of conversation and shared attention on what was going on, and it was normalized.
Yes.
And I think in that, that's part of what helped build that safe space that you were describing you felt in that classroom.
Beautiful, Ashley May, which lends itself to the latter part of our conversation about where do these opportunities reside? And as Ashley May just highlighted, you saw this beautiful opportunity that was occurring during a very intimate routine, but a very necessary routine.
And I think, Rhoda, at this point in the timing, I think talking about how we actually embed this and get to look at that might be helpful.
I do too. I do too. Your PowerPoint slide will have other slides that ask you questions related to where do these opportunities reside. We also have a slide that's going to give you some considerations for how adults provide feedback for infants and toddlers. And these considerations are anchored in both the infant and toddler class tools themselves. So we do observations with the infant and toddler class. We're available to do additional professional development experiences around those tools as well. So many of you who are familiar with the class tools are going to recognize that language greatly. So let's move on to application and embedding.
We just wanted to briefly touch on, so this is something you're already doing. You know that to some extent, but the big takeaway is that we really hope folks leave with a fresh idea and excitement and curiosity for this intentionality piece. And we just wanted to touch on a few strategies of how that might happen. Some questions that can help are, how can you make thinking visible? How can you make their thinking be heard? And what shifts could you make in the environment even to scaffold thinking? And thinking back is a good example to this is the video with April at the water table. It didn't come up in our conversation, but she had herbs. There were some spices that had been put in that table that is an adjustment to the environment to be able to have as a tool to scaffold and work on specific ideas in that feedback. So we know that that rosemary, thyme, and wonderful smelling stuff did not just appear with the plastic boat. They intentionally made that decision because they had certain goals and objectives in their feedback when they were planning the environment. And when you're working on this yourself and thinking about what am I saying, I teach too, and I tell a lot of folks, leave a tape recorder in there sometimes, because what happens in your natural conversation is amazing to listen to after the fact as such a learning tool for yourself. What types of phrases am I using? Am I using the same go-to phrases? What might I be able to change these phrases to be more powerful? And always thinking about self-talk in your own life, because to teach someone to think about thinking, we have to be more intentional about thinking about our own thinking, which starts to sound a little repetitive, but we can't teach metacognition or big brain work if we're not doing the big brain work. So we wanted to wrap this all together with looking at a short role play scenario between a child and a teacher, and then have just a few questions for you all. So the scenario here, and I'll just read it. The scene is that Lisa is at a coloring table, and the teacher says, "What are you drawing?" Lisa replies, "House." "What color is your house?" "Blue." "Where are the windows?" "Oh," says Lisa, and she adds windows. The teacher asks, "Do you want me to draw you a car for your house?" "No," said Lisa, who leaves the art table and puts her picture in her cubby. And I think, Rhodas, you're on mute again. I see you jabbing.
Oh God, I'm just in here just talking away, chirping away at the same time. Let's actually lifted that scenario of Lisa into the space. We just had 3 questions for you to ponder as well. And those questions were like, what type of feedback was occurring during that interaction? What aspects of effective feedback were present in that scenario? And what would you do differently? Thinking about the ultimate goals of effective feedback, this ongoing learning, this ongoing engagement, as well as this language component. What type of feedback was occurring in that scenario?
And I just added those to the chat for reference so we can continue to see each other's beautiful faces instead of a PowerPoint.
Yes. Thank you, Ashley Mae. Thank you. So even in that interaction, we did see verbal forms of feedback. We saw verbal forms of feedback. Did we see nonverbal forms of feedback perhaps occurring? Any hints, any assistance, any cues?
Maybe the nonverbal feedback, or well, maybe a nonverbal thing from the child was whenever she finished the windows and she's like, no, she didn't want her to draw the car. She put her thing away. That was letting the teacher know that, you know, she was done with that drawing.
She was done, Miss Amy. So there was not this extension of engagement, which is one of the goals of feedback. That definitely did not occur in there. So how would you change this scenario? This is about reframing. So how would you change this? What would you do to extend this opportunity for ongoing engagement with Miss Lisa? So she wouldn't just say, no, I don't want no car. Put my picture in the cubby.
Maybe she could go follow up and see what she was doing next, and maybe the teacher could still try to join her.
Beautiful, Miss Amy, beautiful.
I think you could have asked her more about the house, like, tell me more about your beautiful blue house or something. I mean, I don't know if I would have gone with, let me draw you a car, you know.
That's what I asked.
I would have gotten them more like, oh, I really like your roof or your front door, or have you seen a blue house or something like that. I think that's how I would have played it out instead of let me draw you a car.
Right.
I asked Ashley that same thing. It was like, how she know she wanted the car? She didn't want no car.
Right.
Thank you, Miss Amanda. Thank you.
I
Miss
think maybe
Kimberly.
I would have been drawing a picture with her, and I talk about my picture while and ask her questions about her picture. So we're drawing together. So we can talk about each other's picture. I think that would engage her more and invite her into a conversation if we are both doing the same thing and we're talking about what we're doing.
Beautiful, Miss Kimberly. Thank you. Beautiful. So many different ways that we can actually extend the interaction, extend the engagement, and as well as extend the language and the conversations. So that was just a quick scenario we wanted to lift it as a way to begin to apply, to continue applying. Because as Ashley stated, we know y'all are doing this every single day. So this is about extending, not beginning, extending.
You're really taking that intentional piece to go back and kind of refresh and feel more curious and passionate and excited about what it looks like every day in practice too.
So you're going to get a lot of resources, y'all. So I'm just going to lift one of the resources into the space. It's a self-assessment. It's a reflective type handout. And it's going to be a part of your PowerPoint, but it simply has these questions that are designed for us to become more attuned to how we're providing directions, as well as how we're providing feedback. And Ms. Shanita, number 7, give children opportunity to respond. That's where this conscious intentionality related to allowing time and space, particularly with young children of varying ability levels, this allowing this gift of time. And even for our young infants who are in these developing stages of language and communication, allowing time for them to respond, time for them to reach out and connect with us and communicate with us, whereas the verbal language may not be present yet, but it is, and they're babbling. But it's just this allowing this gift of time for young children, even when our days are extremely hectic with many competing demands on us. So this handout will be in your PowerPoint as well as a wide variety of additional resources for all of us to continue exploring this topic, and for all of us to realize that there is indeed power in feedback for infants, for toddlers, and for adults as well.
Thank you for viewing this content. You can now press the blue arrow, which allows you to complete a few more questions for the evaluation part of this session. Once you are finished with those questions and press the final blue arrow, your DCDEE training certificate should appear. At that point, we encourage you to right-click and save the certificate if you're using a PC or laptop, or you can also screenshot it if you're using a tablet or phone. Once you have submitted the evaluation, you will receive a confirmation email from us, and your certificate will also be in that email. Of course, if there are any challenges along the way with technology, do not hesitate to reach out to us at equipped@uncg.edu. You can email us and we will respond back and give you the certificate if needed. Thank you again. Thank you for viewing this recorded content from Equipped. We encourage you to visit our website at equipped.info to learn more about how Equipped supports and encourages early childhood professionals in Guilford County. Thank you.